From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Suini Gray. Campaigning for the May 20th election comes to an end today. President Nicolas Maduro held his final presidential campaign rally in the capital, Caracas. Supporters lined the streets one last time in what has been the most festive atmosphere among the presidential candidates. He was even joined on stage by the football legend Diego Maradona. Maduro said he's a mature president, ready for new victories. He said with the experience of the last 5 years and the vote of the people, he promises to lead major economic changes and dedicate his life to put the economy to the service of the people of Venezuela.
The government has made some mistakes, but also a lot of positive things, in spite of the many problems they face. The people say that you can't find anything in the stores, but the same companies that produce food also produce cigarettes and alcohol. So you can't find bread, but you can find beer. Why do you think that happens? So the people who want to establish the dollar as our currency should first remember their identity. It's not me who say it, but our history. The dollarized countries only get worse. This is my first vote and I'll give it to the revolution. I'm loyal to the revolution. As my president said, they won't come back.
And Ian Bruce was there as Maduro wrapped up his campaign in Caracas.
We're in the center of Caracas, in the Avenida Bolivar, where President Nicolas Maduro is holding the closing rally of his campaign ahead of Sunday's election. Now, this has been a historic site, the location of many large demonstrations during all these years of the Bolivarian Revolution. And again today, as you can see, it's a large and lively turnout. To talk about this election campaign, we have with us Jeanette Charles. She's from Venezuela Analysis, and she's also guiding a delegation of election observers here. Thanks, Jeanette.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me your impressions of the campaign. Does the size of this turnout, compared with much smaller turnouts I've seen at Henry Falcon's events, does that reflect the real balance of forces? What kind of a campaign is it being?
Well, I think for us at Venezuela Analysis, one of the major points that we're trying to talk about in our coverage and with our international delegation is the Venezuelan people's right to decide and determine their future. I think this manifestation, this protest, in support of the Bolivarian process kind of shows internationally and nationally that there's a continued support for the revolution, that people believe in the fight for the 21st century socialist process, not just in their own country, but across the region, and historically are following a tradition of different movements and peoples across Latin America and the Caribbean who have fought to challenge, U.S. imperialism, capitalism, and to fight for the rights of the people. And so this, as early as it is today, I mean, this is like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We still have many hours to wait till Nicolas Maduro actually shows up. I know people are coming from different parts of the city, so it's really exciting. And for myself, I was here in 2012. During Chavez's campaign in 2013, for Maduro's campaign as well, and there is an overwhelming sense of support for the process that's undeniable.
One of the things that's surprised me, and I guess would surprise many people, is that given the obviously very great difficulties that people have in daily life at the moment because of the economic war, as they call it here, that there's still such a kind of lively, upbeat atmosphere. I mean, how do you interpret that?
For me, my family history is from Haiti, from the first Black Republic of this hemisphere, and I think people are committed in the same ways to the fight of the working class and know that this revolutionary process is unlike any other and is going to be the way in which people can actually build a new society, one that challenges the economic crisis. Any of the other candidates really are proposing either full, retreat to neoliberalism and capitalism, or band-aid remedies. Whereas, even with some of the political contradictions that we've seen and challenges that have come about because of the economic war, people are really trying to innovate, are really trying to change their conditions, and I think for that same reason, that's why people, continue to be as lively as possible and as optimistic. I mean, really, Venezuela and the Venezuelan people offer a lighthouse in some ways for the rest of the region in terms of being able to continue to move forward and usher a different process.
Just tell me briefly about the delegation you're going to be helping during this election. What are they going to be doing? What are they expecting?
Yeah, so we have a delegation of folks mainly from the United States who will be here for a week observing the elections and also meeting with Venezuelans from different grassroots movements, also different officials, as well as just civil society at large, to kind of get to know the reality behind the revolutionary process and to kind of break through what mainstream media is, preventing people from seeing. This is our second delegation as Venezuela Analysis to make that attempt to be a bridge between peoples and movements. And folks will be here in Caracas, will be around the coast. Folks will be meeting with women's groups, young people, cooperatives, the CLAP distribution networks, also learning about the history of the Guarimba violence in the opposition, understanding the impact of sanctions on everyday life, and as well as learning about just what are the projects that people foresee in the next few years.
Thank you very much, Jeanette.
No, thank you for having me.
So that's Jeanette Charles from the Venezuela Analysis. She's also helping one of the observer missions here for Sunday's election. And as you can see, an upbeat take both on this election process and the whole Venezuelan process that goes behind it. We'll have more later.
Thank you, Ian, for that report. Meanwhile, the presidential candidate Javier Bertucci has also closed his electoral campaign. Bertucci is promising a solid economy and respectable salaries for all Venezuelans. His events have had some of the largest turnout, which is particularly for someone who has just entered politics this year. His following includes the militant evangelical Christian Venezuelan, a section of the population which has grown in recent years. He closed his campaign by calling on Venezuelans to go to the polls as the best way to stop the economic blockade. And on the closing day of the presidential campaigning, candidate Henry Falcon returned to his home state of Lara. It was in this state that Falcon spent 2 terms as governor. The presidential contender is holding a rally in the capital of Barquisimeto, which is sure to be one of his largest campaign events. However, as popular as he was, he recently lost the governorship to the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. And international observers will be monitoring the Venezuelan elections, ensuring that it all runs smoothly. Earlier, we spoke with the professor and analyst Fernando Casado, who will be headed to Venezuela from Ecuador. Now, we asked him about the abstentious section of the opposition and their possible reasoning for calling an election boycott.
I think that there is a collaboration between the MUD, these candidates that decided not to run for the elections, together with some political actors like Juan Manuel Santos, President of Colombia, the ex-President of Spain, Felipe González, who have been stating that the fall of President Maduro is imminent. Also, international organizations like the European Union Parliament, the group of Lima countries, the United States, have done very harsh statements against the elections in Venezuela. So altogether, I think that this is clearly propaganda. What I think is that they are preparing the public opinion, international public opinions, for something else after the elections. And it's quite worrying because this propaganda could even leave the ground for an intervention or something like that, because the United States has been very harsh. I think that's why the MUD candidate did not run for these elections, especially because they were ordered not to do it in order to try to portray the elections in Venezuela as not reliable, and then have the perfect excuse for something else afterwards as an intervention.
Now, still in Venezuela, where a group of inmates at Venezuela's intelligence quarters, which also houses prisoners, tried to riot. The Venezuelan authorities say the prisoners at the Helicoides Center in Caracas were asking for the release of some of their fellow inmates. The situation, however, is now under control. The Venezuelan General Prosecutor Tarek William Saab says he has sent a delegation to talk with the inmates. Via Twitter, Saab said a delegation from the prosecutor's office went to Helicoide to listen to the prisoner's request. He added, after this conversation, we are willing to coordinate with the prison authorities to resolve the issues raised. And the candidate Javier Bertucci attempted to visit the imprisoned opposition figures in Helicoide today, but he was met by protests from the family members. Bertucci was not allowed to enter the prison. Family members yelled at him, saying the situation isn't about the campaign, but about justice. Bertucci said in a statement on social media that he did not intend to politicize the prisoners, but he was there to show his support. He said he intended to highlight the mental and physical state of prisoners who oppose the government. He also said it was time to leave hatred aside and think about all Venezuelans.
These people who are inside the helicopter are deprived of freedom for political reasons, for thinking differently from the government, and we cannot be disunited. I came to perform an act of solidarity here, and in the end this happens. With this hatred, how will the country be rebuilt?
Now, Henry Falcon is also speaking out about the situation at the prison. He said via Twitter, "We condemn the abuse of more than 300 prisoners in the Helicoide. The only thing they have done is to demand what the Constitution guarantees: release of prisoners, transfer of the sick to health centers, and respect for due process." Okay, so we're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Colombia, tens of thousands of people had to evacuate their homes after the flooding of the Cauca River at Colombia's largest hydroelectric project. Our correspondent in Bogota, Paula Fernandez, has more.
There is a red alert after heavy floods at the construction site of hydroelectric dam Hidroituango. 12 municipalities from 4 departments have been affected, forcing thousands of people to leave their homes and stay in shelters. Many of them had to sleep inside a sports arena used as a shelter by the victims since they haven't received any humanitarian help from the government.
Now, experts had warned that the mega project would endanger lives and community leaders. And community leaders denounced the construction.
A national emergency has been declared after the Cauca River overflowed due to the uncovering of one of the Hidroituango hydroelectric tunnels, affecting more than 1,200 families.
They definitely failed in some stages of the plans. They didn't take the necessary contingency measures that would guarantee the strength of the project before putting it into operation.
This hydroelectric dam project is the biggest in Colombia, with more than $4 million invested. During the 8 years of construction, it also generated serious impacts.
The great environmental impact of these dams have been established. It's killing the second most important river in Colombia and affected the limited tropical dry forest.
According to social leaders, this was an accident waiting to happen. Since 2010, they have been fighting for inhabitants' rights. They say they have not been listened to and that their concerns have been met with hostility from the authorities.
People have been made homeless because of the police, the army, and the workers of the hydroelectric project. Because they didn't let us exercise our legitimate right to protest. We have been dispersed and we took refuge in the Coliseum of the University of Antioquia for almost 8 months.
The Rios Vivos movement have condemned the persecution and murders of leaders who have spoken out against the hydroelectric dam project.
This year they killed Hugo Albeiro, who was a leader who spoke out against Hidroituango in terms of land, and they also killed his nephew, who wasn't even involved in the movement. They also killed Luis Alberto Torres, who was a member of the movement and a social and environmental rights defender.
The Rios Vivos movement has called for the Hidroituango's environmental license to be cancelled and blamed public companies from Medellin and the National Authority for Environmental Licenses. In Puerto Valdivia, the evacuation alert was declared, and the maximum alert continues in municipalities like Cáceres, Tarazá, and Caucasia.
A Colombian court has suspended the extradition process of the former FARC member Jesus Santrich. The special peace jurisdiction decided to suspend the extradition process ordered by the United States against the ex-guerrilla for alleged drug trafficking. The special peace jurisdiction has requested that the Colombian Attorney General's office deliver evidence indicating that Santrich committed a crime. The evidence would need to sufficiently justify his arrest in order for the extradition order to go through. Now, Ecuador joins worldwide celebrations on the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. Activists use art in the center of the capital, Quito, as a form of protest, decorating it with different items to showcase their struggle. The last report published by the National Institute of Statistics and Census said that Ecuador's rates of discrimination, exclusion, and violence, mainly in public spaces, are higher than 50%. The Ecuadorian Equity Foundation says that despite increasing acceptance of different sectors of society, there is still violence and aggression towards these groups, which still fight for same-sex marriage. And in Cuba, there's a strong LGBTI activist movement that has been holding events throughout May. Our correspondent, Laura Prada, is in Havana.
Hello, yes, nice to greet you from Havana. Indeed, today, 17th of May, Cuba celebrates the Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. In all the country, activities have been taking place since the 4th of May and will end tomorrow, 18th. These activities also not only are taking place in Havana, which a big conga around the city took place last Saturday, but in different provinces of the country. For example, in Santiago de Cuba, a huge demonstration took place, and activists give away condoms and brochures explaining how to protect people from sexual transmitted diseases like HIV and other sicknesses. Also in Pinar del Rio, the most occidental province of Cuba, there is taking place today a big demonstration in the street, and all activities concerning the days of celebration, the season of the Cuban season against homophobia and transphobia, moved to Pinar del Rio, and there are taking place different activities, workshops, and people are sharing and talking about how Cuban society can be more inclusive. This is what's been taking place here in Havana, and I expect that in the rest of the world also these activities have been taking place with much inclusivity, like here in Cuba.
Laura Prada. Now, Barbados' Prime Minister and leader of the Democratic Labour Party, Frondell Stewart, is attacking his opponent Mia Mottley's record on women. Speaking in a political meeting on Wednesday, he said there were several important pieces of legislation on which Mottley was not vocal.
When we debated substantial amendments to the Domestic Violence Protection Orders Act, an act that was passed during the Sandiford years in 1992. Her voice was not heard either. But you know, all of a sudden you hear now that if you say anything about her, you're attacking women, when not once, as far as I can remember, her voice has ever been heard, raised in Barbados in defense of women. Never once. Mother's Day come and go. You don't hear her voice?
Meanwhile, the Barbados Labour Party is condemning what they call the cheap politics of the ruling party. At a press conference Thursday, DLP representatives said the government was resorting to personal attacks in their campaign against the political leader, Mia Mottley.
The Dems evidently saw nasty personal attacks as an escape route to avoid accountability for the awful mess in which they have landed this country. Because of their mismanagement, which has yielded failure after failure, the performance of our economy has slipped to an all-time low. Our political leader, Mayor Amor Motley, has been the main target of the Dems campaign of nastiness. In the face of the abuse, she has been stoic and graceful, like a true queen.
In Nicaragua, the peace talks continue following several weeks of violent protests. For the latest, we go to Maria Jose Diaz in Managua.
President Daniel Ortega has set up a peace dialogue with students, civil society, and private sector representatives, with the Episcopal Conference of Nicaragua acting as mediators. President Ortega called for an end to the violence regardless of political affiliation or religious beliefs. However, many see groups which are believed to be financed by the right-wing opposition continuing to commit violent acts. They continue blocking roads across the country, attacking security forces, and destroying public property. According to reports, one person died last night during these attacks. The resumption of the peace talks is set for Friday at 9 a.m.
Workers from Peru's health sector marched on Thursday to demand the government increase wages and the health sector budget in general. The call to strike comes after 8 months of talks with the Peruvian government failed to reach an agreement. Now, there were brief clashes with police during the protests. The Ministry of Health has called the strike unfair. Jaime Herrera has more from Lima.
The administrative and workers from health sector strike begins today. They are heading to the health department to make their demands. Among them are salary increase, better treatment, but most of all, they want a budget increase. At the national level, a lot of hospitals are in crisis because they lack of medicine, equipment, personnel, and have poor infrastructure. They want this thing fixed so they can attend to the thousands of patients who go to the health centers daily in a proper way.
Thank Jaime for that report, and we take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned North Korea's Kim Jong-un to, quote, make a deal to give up his nuclear weapons program or face the same fate as Libya's Colonel Gaddafi.
The model, if you look at that model with Gaddafi, that was a total decimation. We went in there to beat him. Now, that model would take place if we don't make a deal, most likely. But if we make a deal, I think Kim Jong-un is going to be very, very happy.
The Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was murdered by NATO-backed fighters in 2011. The U.S. spearheaded the brutal regime change operation after Gaddafi discontinued his nuclear weapons program in 2003. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has defiantly made yet another foreign visit to meet with his main ally, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin is cited by Kremlin sources as telling Assad that Russian forces will begin withdrawing from the country. He is quoted as saying, given the victories and successes of the Syrian army in the war on terror, foreign armed forces will start leaving Syrian territory. And the Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki has suggested that Arab states recall their ambassadors in Washington. He was speaking at a meeting of the Arab League headquarters in Cairo.
Despite our understanding of the relationship between Arab states and the United States, however, there is no harm in Arab states collectively recalling their ambassadors in Washington to their capitals for consultations and to show the Arab discontent from America's bias towards the occupation. This should happen in addition to recalling the European Union ambassadors to reiterate the Arab refusal of the moving of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem.
The Kenyan LGBT community has marked International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia. The rallying event offers an opportunity for people to get together and to reach out to one another across the world. It comes just days after the Kenyan Film Classification Board banned the homegrown romance, a movie of the homegrown romance of two teenage girls, Rafiki, the first Kenyan film to be shown at the Cannes Film Festival.
Despite tremendous progress over the past 25 years, we're witnessing today a surge of hate speech and human rights abuses against LGBTI people. At the UN, we believe in the crucial role of the private sector in helping us to tackle discrimination and provide a path to acceptance and inclusion for LGBTI people around the world.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telus4tv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.